Thank you, Ronald. I'm not quite sure who you were talking about there, but it seems like a fine fella. But thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. My name is Don, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April the 9th of 1981. My sponsor is Bob B. from St. Paul, Minnesota. And my profession has been criminal defense law. And in the last 42 years, I have spent more time on Alcoholics Anonymous than I have on practicing law. And I have not lost one thing by doing that. God has taken care of me beautifully. Not that I have neglected my law practice, but I have spent more time with sponsees, more time traveling, more times doing the things that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I learned early that the idea of me ever fitting Alcoholics Anonymous into my life was simply not going to work. And I don't see it work for many alcoholics of my kind. If it were going to work for me, it became clear early on that I had to fit my life into Alcoholics Anonymous and let everything else grow around that. And that has been the way the last 42 years has gone. And I just love step 11. I was taught that the first 9 steps are built on one another and necessarily are done in order. But I was also taught that we can begin using 10, 11, and 12 on our first day sober. And I'm glad that I was taught that, because beginning to use those steps before I had completed the first 9 steps may have kept me sober. I have come to the conclusion that just for me, I'm not preaching this for anybody else, but for me, the 2 most important spiritual traits are simple courtesy and persistence. And it was persistence with regard to step 11 that allowed my mind to become open to the idea of a higher power. Because when I got here, I was completely closed. I had spent my entire life as an evangelical agnostic. It was part of my mission to disabuse the superstitious of their superstitions. And believe me, I preached it big and I preached it far and wide. And I believe with all my heart that I had taken step 2, I was rather step 1, a couple of years before I got sober, because I had reached some conclusions. I had concluded first the basic step 1 conclusion, that I was in a humanly hopeless position with regard to alcoholism. And I also had concluded that if I were going to live, and there was just a little part of me that wanted to live, but if I were going to live, that I was going to have to somehow get this AA thing that you guys had. And what I had backwards was I thought if I were going to get it, I had to somehow change what I thought, felt, and believed to make it more like it looked like to me you thought, felt, and believed. And for a couple of years, and for at least 18 asylums in 21 months, I tried my best to make those changes. And I could change absolutely nothing about the old crazy picture show in the back of my head. And that's my pet name for my thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. But I began to have a great realization. I began to realize, and I love the word realize. I used to think to know and to realize were the same thing. And then I'd even related, because realize is a form of the word real. When I have realized something, that literally means it has become into reality inside me. And there's all sorts of stuff I've known for over 70 years that has not been brought into reality inside me. And I began to realize that those thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of mine that I thought were the center of the universe have never one time in nearly 80 years now left a footprint on reality. Now, if I abdicate my behavior to that old crazy picture show, that behavior will leave hideous footprints on reality. But in and of themselves, they have no power. And God didn't give me much power, but God gave me enough. God gave me the power over my own next action. And God gave me the power to behave better than that old crazy picture show in the back of my head. And I learned finally, after spending so many years trying to heal a sick mind with a sick mind, I finally began to realize that if my mind were going to be healed, it would not be healed by my mind. That was the problem. It would be healed by my feet. It would be healed by my behavior. So early on, I was told that I needed to get on my knees every morning and every night and ask a power greater than myself to get through the day without drinking or drugging. I remember tearfully nodding at him and thinking, well, that's a bridge too far. That ain't going to happen. But I didn't know that God had given me the most important gift I've ever had. And what that gift was and is today is that I began to voluntarily follow suggestions about how to run my life, even though I didn't understand them, I didn't agree with them, I didn't believe they would work for me, and I did not want to do them. But I began to do them anyway, and lo and behold, they worked anyway. I persisted with getting on those knees, and at first, as far as I was concerned, I was talking to the wall, embarrassed, even though I was by myself, asking something I didn't believe was there to something I didn't believe could be done. But I persisted. You see, God didn't give me the ability to even recognize perfection, much less attain it. So perfection is just flat off the table for me. The only thing that I've done perfectly in the last 42 years is remain physically sober. Everything else has been persistence, persistence, persistence. If I had to wait until I intellectually believed step 2, that there was some power, metaphysical power greater than myself that could get me out of this humanly hopeless situation with alcohol, I would have been rotting in a pauper's grave somewhere for around 42 years. But what happened was, it occurred to me that maybe I ought to start behaving like a person would behave if they did believe step 2. And I began to behave like such a person. And I persisted. And I persisted with the prayer on my knees every morning and every night. And the twin miracles of the second step happened. The first one was when I began to behave like a person would behave if they believe step 2. I got most of the benefits of being a believer, including staying sober. And the second part of the twin miracle was it turned out that for me, faith and belief are like everything else in my life. I have never one time thought, felt, or believed my way into right behavior. I have had to behave my way into right thinking, feeling, and believing every single time. And that is good news, because the power that God did not give me was a magic wand to wave and change this old crazy mind of mine. But God did give me the power over that next stitch. My God lights my way, but my God lights my way with a pen light for a single stitch. I've always wanted God to come down and say, "Oh, Don, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, son. Let me lay out this next 90 days so you don't have to worry about it, and give me a buzz about day 85 and I'll give you another chunk so you can just relax." But it doesn't work that way. One little stitch at a time, one little step at a time. And the essence of faith, I believe I'm at my most faithful and at my most spiritual when I'm taking that next stitch where I know in my heart it is right. When every other part of me is screaming, "Don, you're not going to get what you want if you do that. It's not going to work out." So I believe doing the right thing because I want to do it is beautiful. In fact, it's probably the only freedom that a human being can know. But I don't grow much from doing what I want to do anyway. I grow when I do that right thing, when every fiber of my body wants to do the opposite. But anyway, moving on to where I'm supposed to be, to step 11. And I began really early reading pages 86, 87, and 88 as part of my morning routine, and it has always been so that I read those. And step 11 was the most important step in my sobriety for at least 9 years, and then 6 and 7 moved in. But the power and the importance of step 11 did not diminish just because 6 and 7 got more important. Step 11 is awfully, awfully powerful. And there are many different ways to do morning prayer and meditation. And I doubt that there's a wrong way to do it as long as we are doing it in good faith. I also have discovered something else that I want to mention. If I want to improve my conscious contact with my loving God, I better pay a whole lot of attention to my conscious contact with my fellow man. Because you see, the only part of God that I ever actually get to see or talk to, or that I can do God doesn't need me to do a thing for him. But God's children need me to do a lot of things for them. And I believe that everything that I do for God's children, I do for God. And I believe everything that I do to God's children, I do to God. And I believe it's awfully important for me to have much of a relationship with my loving God if I am not in harmony with my fellow man. And that's where the courtesy comes in. I've come to the conclusion that it is absolutely impossible for me to be discourteous and spiritual at the same time. Think about it. I just don't think you do it. And I've concluded that there's never any reason to be discourteous. My profession involves cross-examining a lot of what we call hostile witnesses. And the first 10 years I practiced law drunk, and I had a lot of success. And I had a lot of people tell me I was great at cross-examining witnesses. But I have found that I do a much better job with courtesy than I ever did with the harshness and the sharpness and the sarcasm and the chasing them into corners. You simply catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And it just works everywhere. And that courtesy works in my home with my dear sweet Sharon, that some of you folks know. We've been married 33 years and have never had an argument. And the main reason for that, there are two reasons. The main reason is we are unfailingly courteous to one another, regardless of what we may think about what the other one's doing or thinking. We are unfailingly courteous. And the other reason is we never, ever keep score. And did I ever luck out on that one? Because I'd have to live to be 5,000 years old to get even if Sharon had kept score on it. But the courtesy is just so important. If I'm unfailingly courteous, I get into almost no human conflict ever. I get into human conflict when that ego of mine jumps in there and makes me discourteous and makes me want to show people how smart I am and how much quicker my mind is than theirs. And that's when I get in trouble. But when I say courteous, I'm apt to be humble. And I'm a long way down the road to seeking to love, comfort, and understand you, rather than to seeking to be loved, comforted, and understood by you. And that's the most important thing to me in human relations. I pray that prayer sometimes 100 times during one single conversation because I have to persist, because I go back to wanting to be loved, comforted, and understood. And it just doesn't work. If any part of me is wanting to be loved, comforted, and understood, I found out that it's a spiritual law. I won't be loved, comforted, and understood to my satisfaction. It just won't happen. The only time it's possible for me to be loved, comforted, and understood to my satisfaction is when I pray it until I have truly laid aside whether I get what I want and what you think of me. And I'm giving you my entire interest, attention, and love. And I'm seeking to love, comfort, and understand you. And then that changes absolutely everything. You know, the 11th step starts backwards. You ever notice that? It starts with when we retire. And it's got one, which I've always thought if I were writing the big book, I'd have put that in step 10, but big news. I didn't write it, and there's probably a real good reason for that. But it's a wonderful way to end our day, is running through asking ourselves the questions on page 86 of when we retire at night. On days when I've had a good day, I run through that in 60 seconds. On bad days, it may take me 30 minutes. And then it gets around on awakening. And I asked my original sponsor, Sherry Carpenter, just when and how during the day I should begin to establish a conscious contact with God. And Cherry said, Don, it says there in the book that on awakening, we think about our plans for the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. But before we even begin that, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And Cherry told me that there were a couple of really good reasons why I should do it exactly that way, why I should condition myself to, as soon as my eyes flew open, to think, God, please direct my thinking. He said the first one was that I desperately need to follow directions, especially if I don't see any sense in them. He said, and the second reason is that I'm perfectly crazy enough to ruin the rest of my life between the bed and the pot. So he decided, he thought that I needed to take it literally. And sure enough, I'd say 80% of the time, it isn't long when my eyes fly open before I'm asked God to direct my thinking, especially asking for those things. And there's so many different ways, I'm not going to try to go into them, of how we can meditate and pray. Gosh, my sponsor, Bob's got 23 or 4 meditation books he uses. My meditation is reading the big book, 2 or 3 little books that I read, making a gratitude list, and sitting down making a list of things to do today. Listening to God. And there are 2 criteria for something getting on that list. One, they have to be capable of being reasonably done that day. No great big overarching, stop procrastinating, be a better person. No, it's return Joe's telephone call, pick up card for Sharon, call Ralph White. It's things like that. Then that second criterion is there are things that if I do them, I will ultimately feel better. And if I fail to do them, I will ultimately feel worse. Cherry Carpenter explained to me that comfort is a very simple thing. He said I could pray until I was blue in the face, live in AA meetings, talk the best program that ever was, but I would never become comfortable until I began to do things that would eventually make me comfortable, even though they may be uncomfortable at the time. And I stopped doing things that will eventually make me uncomfortable, even though they may be really attractive at the time. But I can't put rattlesnakes under my bed and expect to be comfortable. And when I put dishonesties out there, when I stretch the truth, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm putting rattlesnakes under my bed. And I will not be comfortable as long as I'm doing that. Already talked about how ending the day, we've given that little paragraph on 86 is so beautiful. But I love the way that paragraph ends. It says, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. Why? Not because that might keep us from being sober and spiritual and happy, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. And folks, that's what this deal is all about, is our usefulness to others. The book tells us real early on that our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon the constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. And I believe that that is the massive psychological or psychic displacement that the psychiatrist Jung told Roland Hazard occasionally took place in people, because we are people who by nature are constantly thinking about ourselves and how to help ourselves. And these steps get us, and persistence in living this life, get us to a point where we are more constantly thinking about others and how we can help them. And when we are doing that, that massive psychic displacement has happened. We are different human beings when that has happened. Now, we talk an awful lot on step 11 about how to start the day and end the day. But we don't talk nearly as much about what I call the other 95% of the day. Because what I do in the morning and what I do at night amounts to somewhere between 2 and 5% of the day. The rest of step 11 is what I do between those two things. And the big book gives us the most clear, simple directions that we have anywhere in the book on that. On the bottom, page 87, is all in one paragraph. All in one paragraph, along with the wonderfully practical 11th step promises. As we go through the day, we just do three things. It says, as we go through the day, number one, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. That's number one. Number two, we constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show. It was explained to me that I must constantly remind myself of that because I will be constantly trying to run the show. And then the third thing, we humbly say to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. That's all there is to it, folks. Now I add to thy will be done, to pray, to seek, to love, comfort, and understand everyone with whom I come into contact, and to pray to be courteous to everyone with whom I come into contact. But that's just a little addition to mine. That thy will be done is the basic thing. And then continuing in the same paragraph, it says, when we do those three things, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear. By the way, when I got here, I couldn't understand why I wanted to not be in danger of excitement. I thought excitement was a good thing, but I didn't realize that I had excitement and joy confused with one another. Joy is a soft and easy and beautiful thing. Excitement is a ragged, jagged edged thing that cuts your soul and gives you big deals, robs you of your ability to think straight, robs you of your ability to think of your fellow man first. So we're in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. And it's followed by what I believe to be the shortest paragraph in the big book. It works. It really does. Folks, those are some powerful promises for doing three simple little things all day, every day. Powerful, powerful, and practical. Most practical promises in the book. And praying only for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. That's a biggie. That's a real biggie with me. Because I'll be praying for my own selfish ends and not even know I'm doing it. Jumping back to step 6 and 7, For the first 9 years I was sober, I was convinced that it was not only okay, but the only responsible way to be for me to pray for God to take away those character defects that I wanted gone, that were making me uncomfortable, that I thought in my little self-determined objective were standing in the way of my usefulness to God and my fellows. Turns out that's all wrong. Me praying for a character defect to be gone because I want it gone is the same spiritual mistake as praying for a new Lamborghini because I'm praying for my own selfish ends. That 7-step prayer doesn't ask God to remove all our defects of character. And doesn't say anything about us working on any of it. If we could have worked on them, we'd already done that. It talks about God removing things. And it talks about God removing only those things which stand in the way of our usefulness to God and our fellows. And it's not just 6 and 7. That is the span of Alcoholics Anonymous. 3rd step prayer. Take away our difficulties, not so we can be sober and spiritual and happy, but that victory over them will bear witness to those we would help of God's power, love, and way of life. And then you get over to steps 8 and 9, putting our lives in order. And the book says absolutely clearly, yes, we're doing that. We are cleaning up our past and putting our lives in order. But the book says that is not our real purpose. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and those around us. Folks, that's what it's about. That's that massive displacement that Jung talked about. Whether you call it the spiritual experience or whether you call it the educational variety of the awakening, that's what that is. That's realizing that it doesn't work to think about us all the time. It's becoming real to us that it only works if we persist in trying to think about God's kids and trying to help God's kids do what they need to have done. Not only try to help them get sober, help them with whatever they need to be done. Whatever God's kids need to be done. Man, A.A. Will Chuck Chamberlain said that it wasn't his job to take care of him. That was God's job. But it was Chuck's job, to help God's kids do whatever they needed to have done for fun and for free because he wanted to. And I want to tell you folks, when I persist in living that way, my life gets so good I can't stand it. And of course, when I backslide, as I always do, and go to think about being old, that backsliding is all right. If God had wanted me to be capable of perfection, God would have made me capable of perfection. So God made me capable of persistence. And God is tickled to death with persistence. Just keeping on starting over. See, there's a part of me, and I don't know whether I believe in a devil or not. But if I do believe in a devil, in me, it's that thing that wants to tell me that I have screwed up so badly that there's no longer any use. there's no longer a next right thing to do. I've strayed so far from my God's will that there's no way back. That is the big lie. That's the big lie that will take your butt right straight to the abyss. There's a next right thing to do in the middle of robbing a bank. Now, we probably ought not be robbing a bank, and we're probably already in a mess if we're doing that. But there's still a next right thing to do. God won't let me paint myself in the corner. That when I'm willing to put down that paint, lay down that paintbrush of self, regardless of what color I put on it. When I'm willing to lay down that paintbrush and say, oops, Mom, Dad, I fouled up again. Excuse me. Show me where to take that next stitch, and I'm going to take that next stitch. Here's the most beautiful thing of all. When I persist in going back to doing that next right thing, God takes those errant stitches and weaves them into the beautiful, beautiful tapestry of my life and makes me more helpful to other people because of those errant stitches. I know this is kind of gross, but my God is an absolute master of making chicken salad out of my chicken poop. God will do it every time if I'll just go right back to taking that next stitch and saying, oops, Mom, Dad, and no big deals. No big deals. Big deals are cancers. Good big deals, bad big deals. They rob me of reason. They put my ego back in control. I want nothing in my life but little deals other than God and these 12 steps. Everything else, I want to be a little bitty deal. Because if I've made a big deal of anything other than God and the 12 steps, when you scrape the surface off it, you'll find what I've made a big deal out of is Don. And when I've made a big deal out of Don, I'm right back where I can't afford to be. Folks, I've been running my mouth nearly 40 minutes, and I love you all. And thank you so much for putting up with me and having me. And I do love you, everyone. God bless and thank you.
Yeah. Are you able to, okay, Una, why don't I come back to you after Ralph? You seem like you're freezing a little bit. Ralph White, why don't you come on up and mute yourself?
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic. And Mr. Major, thank you, sir. You said a couple of things that were very, very interesting. And I love that I can't put rattlesnakes under my bed and expect to be comfortable. You know, that's a good visual. You get out the bed, get bit on that. But secondly, you said my mind will be healed by my feet. And it's always interesting to me that going through and at this stage, not just in recovery, in life for you, you never talk about it, you never complain about it, you never mention, what's currently front burner. Nobody would know, so I'm not going to, but I wanted you to talk about how having trained feet is especially important to inform and what your decision making, your actions, you're just showing up these days.
Well, Ralph, I think that's connected with the difference between intentions and decisions. See, I used to think I made decisions with my brain, and I don't. I form intentions with my brain, and my intentions don't amount to a hill of beans. My intentions never leave a footprint on reality. My intentions don't graduate to being decisions until I start doing the footwork. And I know that some people will disagree with this. And we talk a lot about our motives in doing things, but I don't think my motive is nearly as important as what I do. In fact, I'm not sure there are wrong reasons to do the right thing. In fact, Ralph, tell you the truth, I'm not sure I ever did a single thing with 100% pure motives in my life. If I had to have 100% pure motives for something to count as something worthwhile, I doubt there's been very much there if you just really scrape the surface and get down. But I do know this, I know that the world judges me totally on what I do. The world doesn't give a hoot what's going on in the old crazy picture show in the back of my head. And I don't think God does either. Think about that for a minute. If God were the kind of entity that will put something involuntarily in our heads and then punish us for having it there when we don't have a magic wand to get rid of it, then we might as well close the meeting and go get drunk if God is that kind of entity. And God is not that kind of entity. I believe my God loves me the very most when I want so much to do the wrong thing, but I know the right thing. And I do that right thing anyway. I think that's when my God loves me the most. And I think that's when I grow the most in faith, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Ralph. That was wonderful. Una, you want to try unmuting yourself again?
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Yuna, and I'm a grateful alcoholic, and thank you so much, Don. I absolutely love you. Like my heart, every time I hear you, my heart is just full. You have such a calming way to get this across, and you do it wonderfully. And I was just wondering, do you have any like YouTube videos or speaker tapes or anything like that that we can have access to?
I understand that there are an awful lot of them on the internet. I have never looked and I've never listened to a word of myself on tape, but I understand that a lot of them out there.
Okay, wonderful question, Una. Thank you. Raquel, come on up.
Hi, my name is Raquel. I am an alcoholic. This is going to be very embarrassing because I've been crying all your share. I hope you don't have a problem with my accent.
I like your accent.
I have a problem with yours. It was difficult in the beginning, but here I am. Okay, about the mistakes, about the speaking. When does it stop hurting so much when you think you make mistakes? My first question. My second question, do you pray to God to help you pause through the day when agitated or doubtful? Because that's the thing that I forget. That's
The second question is what? I missed it.
the second question is, if you say a prayer, or how do you get to a place that you remember to pause through the day when you're agitated or doubtful? Because that's the part that I don't do well.
It is a matter of practice and persistence. Doing it over and over until it becomes second nature. It really does become a working part of the mind. It becomes second nature, but I've had to do it, and there's still times when I have to make myself do it. And I think your first question, why does it hurt so bad when we do the wrong thing? So we won't do it again. Would be my best answer to that.
Beautiful, Carl. Thank you so much for your share. Jeffrey B., come on up.
Yeah, Jeff, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, August 16th, 2003. It's really, really good to be here. Ali, it's finally good to meet you, sir. Don, man, you know, I love listening to you. Like, I love listening to the words that you choose to talk about, and it's different every single time. I hear the music in AA when I hear you when you speak, Don. So I want to thank you for that. And really, what I got to say is something really stuck out for me in your talk there, even though I knew it, practiced it sometimes, all that kind of stuff, but it really hit home. And I'm going to paraphrase. You said something along the lines that what we are doing to others, we are doing to God. Something along the lines like that, or that's what I heard anyways. And I'm like, so when I get disturbed and my voice is risen to my beautiful angelic kids, my amazing wife, I do understand that God is everything, and that, you know, Jeff is an expression of God that the humans decide to name Jeff. So when I'm acting out in agitation, defects, whatever it is that we want to call it, it's like that's how I'm treating this God that I truly believe has given me a life to live and has saved me from alcohol and alcoholism. It really opened the door to me to be conscious what I choose to be conscious of. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's a meditative state. You know, it's like it was talked about, this pause. How do you get to the pause? Repetition.
I call it persistence.
Exactly. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for like just allowing me to hear for the first time, or a new way of hearing that what we're doing to God. That was just big time for me.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. Good question. Good statement. Reggie White, come on up.
Reggie White, alcoholic. Thank you,
Hey,
Don.
Reg.
Hey, thank you. As usual, it's great. I got two quick questions. One, Speed Racer, how is your shoulder?
I'm sorry?
Your shoulder. How is your shoulder, Speed Racer?
It still hurts a little bit, but it's doing okay.
Okay. And secondly, in all the times I've heard you share, in particular today, you rarely talk about promises and what we're getting. You always, can you speak to that as far as why you talk so much about what we're giving as opposed to what we get, what we expect to get?
Well, I'm not real sure I understand the question. But I suspect the answer, Reggie, is that I believe that we receive by giving, that when we try to take for ourselves, we rob ourselves. But when we give to our fellows, when we give to God's other children, then God opens the bounty of the universe to us. and when I'm not letting my fear kick me around, and when I'm not living in my big deals, I'm not locking myself. I believe my God wants me to have just the wonderful things. And I believe that the biggest impediment to that is me and thinking about me. And so consequently, I try to persist in thinking about other folks.
Thank you, Reggie. That was wonderful. iPhone 5, please come on up. Unmute yourself, please.
Is that me or no?
That's you, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to know when and where you're speaking again, because I could not take all of that profoundness in one sitting. When do you know?
I can look real quick and maybe tell you.
Or if someone else knows, they can just tell me in the group chat.
Oh, well, okay, I'll look it up and I know I've got one in the next week or so. So
Okay.
Oh, maybe we can put it in the group chat at the end of the meeting. How's that done?
I think that would be great. Let me see here. The 6th, that's it. I'm speaking on July the 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time at the Box of Chocolates group for Stephen Smith.
Wonderful. That was perfect. Okay, Calvin, come on up. Unmute yourself, please. I was just going to call on you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Calvin. I'm an alcoholic. And Don, wherever you go, I'll try to be there July 6th myself because I want to go. Whatever you talk, I want to be there. I love to hear you talk because what you do is you alter my spirit and my life. And what I was saying is I remember one time reading this thing about the Dalai Lama, right? And they said the more they try to make him bigger in stature, the smaller he becomes. And I felt the exact same thing from you tonight. The more that you go out there, and the more people saying, the more you become small and practical, because you know that's where God sits. And if you could just explain a little bit more about how to become more smaller in stature, and not want to call it, our friend Bill Cleveland always talk about climbing the corporate AA ladder. You know what I mean? Which is nonsense anyway, because you explained that perfectly tonight. So if you could just, expound a little bit about that. How do we stay right size?
I stay right size very simply by thinking about you instead of me. It really is. That's all there is to it. I started out early in my talk, that little sentence, which by the way is on page 20, that as ex-problem drinkers, our very lives depend upon the constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. That's what right sizes me. When I realize that what I am is a servant. I am your servant. I am servant of everybody on here. I'm a servant to all the rest of God's kids, and I desire to be a servant.
No doubt. No doubt. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Calvin. That was a great question. Lana, come on up. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Lana, alcoholic. Hi, Don. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What an amazing share. And I always love to hear you share also. My question is intuitiveness. How do you feel about that? And what is your experience with that?
I know I sound like a broken record, but intuitiveness to me develops as a result of persistence.
Okay.
If I persistently make myself do the right thing, eventually it will become more intuitive to do the right thing. Sitting around trying to think and pray my way into wanting to do the right thing doesn't do me any good. But doing the right thing when I don't want to do it does me a world of good.
Okay. Thank you so much, Don. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Lana. Wonderful question. Sherry, come on up. If you can, please start your video.
Hi, I'm Sherry, an alcoholic, Al-Anon.
And Jerry,
Thank you so much for sharing today. That was amazing. I only got to hear part of it, and so I'm trying to understand something you had said. The idea of doing the next right thing. That you, I'm not sure exactly how you said it, but I've heard it forever, like do the next right thing. But you were talking about that's not exactly how to see that. So could you explain that one more time or further so I might understand?
I believe that in every one of us, there's something that I call a spark of the divine, or the divine spark. I believe there's a little piece of God in every one of us. And it has many names. We call it conscience. We call it better angels. We call it a moral compass. Conventional Christians call it the Holy Spirit. But I believe that that divine spark, by whatever name, is in every one of us. And if we will look for it, and if we will ask to be able to see it, we will become more and more aware of it. And eventually, jumping back to the previous question, it becomes more intuitive to do it.
Is Philip still around?
Oh, I was talking. I was muted. Babette, come on up.
Hi,
Sorry.
thank you. Hi, Babette Alcoholic. Thank you, Don. I think you actually just answered my question. I'll rephrase what I was going to ask. It's actually a question and like a subset of that question. Listening for the voice of God, when we pause and turn and we ask for inspiration in the 11th step, we're going about our day and we're listening for that voice of God. How do we know it's God and not our human will? I mean, and here's a subset. Do we check that direction with the 4 absolutes that Father Bill talks about in the 2-way prayer? I mean, do we go through that checklist? How do we know that we're listening to the voice of God and not human will? Thank you.
Well, the short answer is, I don't always know. But the more I practice, the more clear it gets to me what is right and wrong for me to do. And it's really a simple question. Is it selfish or not? If it is selfish, it is probably the wrong thing for me to do. If it is not selfish, there's a good chance that it's God's will for me to do it.
Thank you, Babette. Great question. Lacey, I said your name right. Come on up.
Hey Don, thank you so much. I've heard you talk a few times and I love when you talk about being courteous. And I was just thinking, like, if you could kind of touch touch on, is it possible to be over courteous? Like, could, you know, will people see, like, take advantage of you? And how you should like set that boundary.
I don't believe in boundaries to start with, so I don't think in terms of boundaries. But I have to tell people some extremely unpleasant things in a very courteous way. That's the nature of my impression. But because I'm courteous does not mean that I'm a floor man at all. That doesn't mean that I'm going to let you walk all over me. I'm just going to be courteous in explaining to you that you're not going to walk all over me, if that makes sense.
Very great. Thank you, Lacey. Brian C., come on up and unmute yourself.
Well, hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for your wonderful message. Much love to you gang there in Louisville, Tim H. and all the other gang that's there. I didn't really have my hand up other than the simple observation that I absolutely love you. And it's just an amazing thing to be here and listen to the simplicity of how you lay out the 11 step from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful to have a sponsorship family that's along that line that you guys are in. And I just love it. And that's an observation. I just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you for your service and continued thoughts and actions. And watching your feet makes me such a better person. And I love the gang from Louisville when they come down and stay with us, and they spread your legacy this way, and it's just beautiful. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Beautiful. Carol L., come on up.
Thank you very much, Don, for your share. I love hearing you, and hold on, gotta get rid of this. But I love when you shared, you know, a lot of times we hear people say you have to work the steps in order. And sometimes people take a long time to work the steps. So I like when you shared that we can start and do 10, 11, and 12 right away. And when you sponsor people, how do you start people when you start to sponsor? Do you get them into doing those steps right away too, like I was taught?
Well, I certainly take them through steps 1 through 9 in order, because I believe they are built on one another, and we're not ready for 2 until we've done 1, et cetera, and so on. But when we get to 10 and 11 and 12, there are things that we can begin using the very first day that we're sober. And I mix that in with leading them through the first 9 steps. And then by the time we're finished with that, we've got a big jump on talking about how to live on 10, 11, and 12. Because we've already been talking about using 10, 11, and 12 in our lives.
Beautiful, thank you. Sherry Levy, come on up, unmute yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. Sherry, alcoholic.
Sherry.
So good to see you, Don.
Good to see you, Sherry.
Thank you for everybody on the team for putting this meeting together for the last 3 years. It's been a beautiful, beautiful journey with all of you. So Dawn, you mentioned a couple books that you kind of read in the morning a little bit. This workshop actually allows us to talk about books outside. So would you share what the other books you read are?
Well, they are real simple. I read from the 12 and 12. I read the Prayer of St. Francis every morning. And I'm going to go ahead and mention the other books that are not the original Little Black Hazelton 24 hours a day. has been a basis of my sobriety. And the OA book, ODAT, One Day at a Time, is an absolute marvelous book. There's some beautiful, beautiful stuff in there. That book contains my favorite quote from any meditation book ever. And it's a quote from the psychiatrist Alfred Adler, who was in the practically the same category as Freud and Jung as far as great psychiatrists. And it's obviously an excerpt from a letter he wrote a patient. And it simply says, if you will begin each day by making it your first priority to bring a real joy to someone else, and you will stick with this for 2 weeks, you will no longer be depressed. You will no longer need therapy.
That was beautiful. We have a couple minutes left before this ends. Don, did you like to leave us with anything else that's on your mind?
Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'll drop back to one thing about courtesy that is important to me, even though I don't have small children. But think about the difference for a child who is raised in a family where the adults are universally courteous and respectful of one another, and are universally courteous and respectful to the children. Think about the difference and the better chance in life that those children have than one that's raised in a household of sharpness and sarcasm and motivation by fear. So courtesy is just an awfully, awfully important thing. It would cure so many of the world's ills.
Thank you, Don. You blessed us with your